Welcome to KC Cares, the voice of Kansas City nonprofits and business sectors to enhance the quality of life right here in Kansas City for both our residents and our visitors. This KC Cares segment is brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, www.kauffman.org. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggis. Gun violence continues to soar. According to a study by the Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Violence Solutions, in the United States, there are 121 firearms per every 100 residents, and someone is killed by a gun every 11 minutes. Guns are also the leading cause of death for young people ages 1 to 17. Kansas City is not immune to gun violence, with the number of homicides, most by gunfire, increasing weekly. But there are folks doing something about it. And we're talking about transformation, the kind that turns something meant for harm into something that helps life grow. Our guest, Pastor Phil Woodson of the Stillwell United Methodist Church, is part of Guns to Gardens KC, a powerful community-based effort working to reduce gun violence in a really unique way. They offer a safe and anonymous option for people to surrender unwanted firearms. No questions asked, but what happens next is what makes this work so meaningful. Those weapons aren't stored, resold, or put back into circulation. Well, instead, they're permanently dismantled and transformed, literally reshaped into garden tools and other items that support life and healing. It's a modern day expression of an ancient idea, turning swords into plowshares, taking something heavy and painful and creating something hopeful in its place. Well, welcome, Pastor Phil.
Hi, how are you? Thank you, Ruth.
We're doing great. We're so glad to have you on the podcast and talk about the important issues and this important initiative. Where to begin? My goodness. So this Guns to Gardens and all of that. Tell us how you first connected with this organization and why did it resonate for you?
Sure. I saw a news report a couple of years ago in 2024 where Central Presbyterian Church was going to host an event. And so it was purely circumstantial. This was also the same year when the Chiefs Super Bowl shooting happened. And me and my children, we were down there at a different part of the parade route, but it could have easily happened anywhere. And so we've been impacted by that. And so as a United Methodist pastor and person of goodwill and somebody do-gooder in the world, I'd like to think, addressing gun violence to protect my children was very meaningful to me. So I called them up. I said, hey, do you guys need any help? I'd love to come and put thoughts and prayers into action to do some kind of tangible work to address gun violence. And they said, yeah, come on. And so for 2 years at Central Presbyterian Church, I volunteered and helped, and we took in over 100 firearms over those 2 years. And this year, there was movement to expand the Guns to Gardens movement in the Kansas City area. And so we've started and now formed our own nonprofit organization and are working to host different events all around the metro area. Northland, over to Independence, over to Lenexa, down south in Johnson County, where my church is. We had an event on May 2nd, and it's just been a really meaningful and powerful way to meet people and to put that tangible work and to put what I hope and think and believe, especially as you said, related to the Isaiah passage of turning instruments of destruction into tools that bring forth life. So it's just a super cool thing, and I was blessed to be able to be a part of it.
Well, we'll get back into that May 2nd event and everything moving forward. I want to dive a little bit into the background. So it's Guns to Gardens KC that's become the nonprofit, or is it something within your own church?
Correct. Yeah. It started as a ministry of Central Presbyterian Church and now has evolved into be its own nonprofit. As a United Methodist, one of our foundational understandings is that we accomplish more good together than we ever will apart. And so working in an ecumenical and even interfaith fashion is a high priority for me and for my congregation and for the denomination. And so it's been a joy to come alongside people who are already engaged in that work, Guns to Gardens just as a national program. The Presbyterian Peace Fellowship has really been leading the charge on this. The PCUSA Church has put forth a lot of time and energy and resources into moving this and making it a true national movement to address gun violence. And so I'm just along for the ride almost a little bit in helping the work that other people started. But Guns to Gardens KC is now its own nonprofit organization. It doesn't have any religious affiliations with it at this moment, even though people of religious ideology and beliefs do help and participate with it. But we welcome the opportunity to work with people of goodwill across any ideological, political, economic, or social spectrum to address a problem that affects everyone in this country.
Well, knowing those in the pastorate, both rabbinic, Christianity, even Islam, I know that there's always a deep dive and a deep study before you jump or share. So what kind of background, or how did you go and learn more about this in the national organization and the church that, really brought it to Kansas City?
Really, it was just showing up. Central did a great job of bringing people into the fold and saying, this is what we're going to try and do, and this is how we're going to work to address it. There are extensive training programs that people go through to be part of the Guns to Gardens network. We have 2 of our board members are certified firearm safety officers for these events.
Wow.
And so they receive not only specific first aid or stop the bleed training, because we're working with power tools, not just firearms, but also firearm safety and handling. So multiple classes provided by the NRA or the Concealed Carry Association, somewhere in there, I think, is a part of it as well, but also in-person training to learn not only how to check firearms when they're turned in, but then safely dismantle them as well.
Now, you have a background, you shared a little before we went on the air, of dealing and helping a congregation that was right in the, excuse the words, line of fire in Charlottesville. Would you share a little bit about that and maybe how that has infused or informed what you're doing now?
Sure. So I've got a couple of things that kind of affect and impact me in this kind of work. The first being a parent. I've got 3 boys who are all in school. I was also an elementary school teacher for 9 years. And so practicing those active shooter drills with students is still something that I had to do for almost a decade. But as a pastor in downtown Charlottesville during the Unite the Right rally in 2017, and even in the years that follow, gun violence was a big part of that. You have armed white nationalists and neo-Nazis outside holding weapons and threatening to use them against people. I've had to cancel worship due to gun violence. And so engaged and actively involved and affected by that in a way where you don't always see firearms used the way that a lot of people use them. There are people who have all kinds of fond memories and understandings and relationships with firearms from family hunting trips, or, it's an Olympic sport. And so there's that component of it as well that I deeply understand. But for me personally, it's a means of addressing fear and harm that I've personally seen and experienced in my life.
Did your church, I'm going to pivot a little bit, did your church have a relationship with Central before this time, or did this really come from catching a news story and saying, oh my gosh, this is here?
I caught the news story in 2024 and went up and helped dismantle guns on the day in October of 2024. And it was just such a meaningful and powerful day for me that the next year, 2025, I invited members of my church to come with me. And so Teresa, who leads the outreach team at Stillwell UMC, she came up with her husband. And again, it's just one of those things where the community coming together with people who are all working towards the same ends, it changes you because you're actually having a tangible effect on the world of meeting people, of helping them process grief and pain when they turn in their firearms, and then also doing that good and holy work of turning those swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. And uh, the effect it has both on your heart and your mind and your soul is powerful. And so just from bringing some church members with me, they're like, we need to expand this and create an opportunity for more people. And so that furthered the partnership. And then when Guns to Gardens KC became its own nonprofit, we needed a test site to try and practice, is this something that we can take on the road? And the short answer is yes. Yes, we can. With about 20 to 30 volunteers, we can host an event anywhere around the greater Kansas City area.
Now, were you involved at all with creating this into a nonprofit, or did others get those fun tasks of filling out many forms?
Yes, I was involved in that. And that was such a cool thing about working with Jenny Wells at Central and even members of her congregation there, is that they kind of did it on their own the first year. And then the second year, as a means to expand it, they brought in more people on their leadership team. And so there were a slew of us from all around the Kansas City area to address this. And then working it up to become its own nonprofit was the next step. And so there's a number of people from all different parts of the city who are involved in leading and running this organization now.
And why did you all decide to go ahead and make it a separate nonprofit?
Some of it is logistical in terms of the limitations of having to operate under a banner of one specific congregation. And so you got the bureaucratic process there of doing that. The other is to be able to fundraise and otherwise, or apply for grants. And so there are some people who want to address gun violence but wouldn't have sticking points specifically with working with religious organizations. And so becoming our own nonprofit was probably just the best choice to increase the capacity to do this kind of work in a further setting. If we were always limited to one congregation, that's going to keep things just centralized. But as a nonprofit who can move and go anywhere and work with other organizations and people, I think it expands the potential for this work to have a greater impact on the fuller metro area.
Well, we're talking with Pastor Phil Woodson. He is with Stillwell United Methodist Church, and he is now part of the new nonprofit, Guns to Gardens KC, doing great work here in our community. So you got to wear a lot of hats. You got to wear the pastor hat, you got to wear the board hat, you got to hopefully wear the warrior hat, I say, which comes with all nonprofit leadership. Always got to have the warrior hat on there somewhere. Talk a little bit about pulling together an event like this. How do you do it? And are there certain requirements of Guns to Gardens? I know you mentioned a little bit, somebody's got to be trained in safety with handling firearms. Talk about all of that, the behind the scenes.
Sure. It starts with conversations with any kind of group who wants to host this kind of event. We could work with a neighborhood organization. We could work with a PTO, a school, a church, any other community group who's interested in hosting this event. We really just need access to power, bathrooms, and a building. So, those kinds of things are necessary. But if your HOA has, a separate clubhouse or something that can be utilized, we can try and find a way to make that work. But it's really about the people and then advertising that out to the world. And so if you've got 20 people who can do this, we want to meet with you. We want to talk with you. It's a single day event. And so we show up and do the training that morning. Oh. We set up that morning. Then we do some walkthroughs and practice. We give people instruction on how to use the chop saws, the dismantling table. We have to set things up in such a way so that if, God forbid, there is an actual loaded gun that shows up, because some people don't know, or if there's an accidental discharge, that we keep people out of the line of fire and we don't need anything going off in the air or in the wrong direction. And so just setting up the safety zones and then working through that process all happens. Then we have lunch, and then we host an event, and then we tear down and debrief.
So
So it's not super complicated. It really is just 20 people who can commit to a day, who have a location, and we will bring the tools, the tents, the safety equipment, all of the things will show right up, and we'll help advertise the event, and come train you how to do it.
you're dismantling them right there. So you're not just taking them in and shipping them to somebody else. Wow.
Well, that's the important component of this too, is that the participants in the program, if they have a firearm that they would like to dispose of, and we should talk about why people might choose to do that too here in a minute. They pull up with the firearm unloaded, hopefully, in their back seat or in their trunk. We check and clear the chamber and the firearm of all ammunition. And so we've got sand buckets and special tools and equipment to do that. And so our firearm safety officers lead all of that. Then it goes over to a dismantling table where we deconstruct as much of the firearm as possible, either removing parts of the chamber or the barrel or the stock. And then we take the last little pieces over to the chop saws, because it is very hard metal, that has to withstand some of those things. And then they have 3 cuts made on the firearm that are in alignment with ATF standards. And we do it in such a way so that we're not breaking any laws or otherwise, but this is part of that training process that our FSOs go through, to where it is no longer legally a firearm, but it's scrap metal, because they're dismantled, disassembled, and destroyed in such a way that they can never be reconstructed again with 3 cuts. And the whole time the participant is there with us. And so it's not a buyback program. It's not a donation. You can't just drop and take off. If you're participating in this program, it's your firearm until it's scrap metal. And then once it's scrap metal, we take it from there, and we work with artists and other creative people who turn and use the wood. And even Jenny, one of our other board members, has her own little blacksmith equipment that she's starting to learn how to use. But they reforge them, melt them, hammer them into all kinds of garden tools and other artwork. And it's just a really cool process.
You say you have the person who's turning the gun go with you all along the way. Is that because of the ownership connection, or is it part of the
Yeah.
whole philosophy with what you're
Well,
doing?
it's part yes and yes in some capacity. You stay with us because you own the firearm until it's not a firearm. And so we're not buying it, we're not trading it. There are rules and laws about doing stuff like that. But this is a disposal event. And that's what I connect with about this probably the most, is that there's all kinds of ways and reasons that people acquire firearms. Either you can buy them, they can be gifted to you, you can inherit them from another family member,
Mhm.
but there's almost no easy legal way to dispose of a firearm. And so that's a key component here. That this is one of the only ways I've heard of where it's like, this is how you can dispose of one. And really, we're not, and this is where it gets emotional a little bit for some people, is that determining whether or not you're ready or you want to dispose of a firearm. I have a lot of family members and even grew up in a community myself where, people have fond memories of hunting with cousins or grandparents or parents. And there's a lot of memories and sentimental value that are ascribed to firearms. And I understand that. Those are wanted. But this event is really for unwanted or unsafe or unusable firearms. And so we got to think about what that means. And even at this past event on May 2nd, we had a car pull up, and not everyone has to share why they're there or what they're doing, but a couple
Mhm.
people like to, because there's stories and emotions involved with it. And so one of the guys said, yeah, I have had these 5 firearms just shoved up in my basement rafters because they got caught up in a house fire a couple decades ago. And there's just nothing I am legally allowed to do with them. You can't throw them in the trash can. You can't put them in the recycling bin, but they're clearly unsafe and you don't want anybody using them.
Mhm.
And you don't want to, pass them on to children or grandchildren who don't know what to do with them. And so there are these firearms that were damaged in a house fire. And so we were so grateful that he brought those in and they can still be used and repurposed. And so none of those memories or sentimental value are lost. It's just really that safety component. And so that's a big thing for me as well, that this is a community safety event. And so even for those who appreciate and have a high degree of affinity for firearms and their time with them and using them, I really hope that they come to see that this is also a safety event. It's a community service. Another woman drove up. She had one revolver that had a crack along the top. And she's like, I know I can't use this anymore, but I don't know what else to do with it. We can dispose of that and we can turn it into something new and life-giving and artistic. And so those who approach this work in that capacity, that safety component is a big one. The last thing I'll say on this is the emotional piece. The vast majority, roughly around 60% of all firearm-related deaths are suicides.
Hmm.
And my understanding is that at least in this area of the country, if that happens, law enforcement officers will go through their process and their steps to take that firearm out of that situation. But at some point, they return it to the family because it belongs to the family. And so imagine receiving that firearm back from a law enforcement officer that a loved one has used recently in a harmful way. What do you do with that?
Mhm.
You don't want to resell it. You don't want the potential for it to be involved in any other kind of harm. And so we've had people show up and tell us those kinds of stories as well. And there's a lot of relief and pain and hope that can still come out of this process. And it's that transformation piece that we see and are pulling even from scripture, this idea that what was once harmful is now helpful. And that's just such a powerful moment to be able to share with other people, if they let you do that.
Indeed. Indeed. That would be, I didn't even realize that that weapon is given back.
Well, and that's the component here, is that it's disposing of them. If you have an unwanted firearm or if it's unsafe in some capacity, a lot of people can turn them into the police station or take them to a firearm retailer or a pawn shop or things like that. But those are all resold and are
Right.
recirculated back out into the world. We learned from the mayor of Kansas City when he showed up to the first event that firearms turned into police stations aren't allowed to be disposed of due to any kind of legal barriers. And so they are held for some determined amount of time or processed in some way, but then eventually sold as a means of fundraising for government work or police work. And so they're not allowed to actually destroy the firearms that are turned in. And so this is one of the only programs, like I said, that follows those ATF guidelines for disposing safely and legally of firearms.
Now, on your May 2nd event, how many folks showed up?
I forget the exact number of cars, but there were definitely moments over the 2 hours where everybody was working. But we received and processed, I believe, 23 firearms. And so there are some pictures on our Facebook page, and we'll put some up on our website here in the next few weeks or so, I imagine. So they'll probably be there soon, of everything laid out. And it's once you see all the components the springs, the gears, the different chambers and of the revolver and the barrels and the stocks, and you see it all laid out. You're like, wow, this is, it's 23 firearms. That number doesn't sound high, but when you see the impact that it has, and knowing that those firearms are going to be able to be transformed into something new, that's a tangible impact, especially for a small community like Stillwell.
Where are these repurposed pieces in the art sold? Do you have sales of things, or is it just goes off independently and
Yes, and yes. And so that's one of the pieces that we're still forming and working on, because it's metal is such a difficult material to work with and requires such specialized skills. We're still working with blacksmith organizations and people who do that kind of work, but it takes time. And all of our past two events have been in October. And so finding people to do that who can and have the skill set and the desire to work with those materials is something we're still actively trying to create partnerships with. And so we have a few people who are already working with a few items from our event in 2025. But for those who are listening, if you are an artist who can work with metal or wood in some capacity and want to partner with us, we would love the opportunity to provide you with some raw material that you can use, both the artists for themselves and their own work, or to work with us as Guns to Gardens KC, so that we can start putting some of that on our website, and again use that as a fundraising opportunity where people can actually purchase some of this stuff. There's, all kinds of plans and things that are possible as we get up and rolling. But again, we've only been a nonprofit for a few months. But our ultimate goal here is to maybe even provide opportunities for people, if you have those specialized firearms that you have a lot of connection with, that you can be a part of that whole process, from the dismantling, the destruction, and the transformation, so that you could potentially follow your own firearm through the whole process and receive a piece of artwork back from it. So that way you can still maintain those components, but you can see the transformation that has it and still have it in your house and feel comfortable and safe gifting that to someone else or passing it on to your children and grandchildren.
what is the best way to get in touch with you all? Is it through your website? And feel free to give us that address.
Yeah, it's gunstogardenskc.org. All one word. You can see photos of events. You can learn a little bit more about what it looks like to host an event. We are looking for other host organizations and groups of people who want to take a Saturday and just try and put this together. And there's contact forms on there. You can also send us a direct email at gunstogardenskc@gmail.com.
What along this way has surprised you now that you've really taken a deep dive into it and hosted an event at your community, your faith community?
I think what has surprised me in such a good way is during these events to see people from across the political spectrum come to a shared understanding of how this helps make our community safer. I think national statistics and information back this up, that even gun owners support gun safety legislation. And so it's not that everyone out there is just hoarding and keeping and using and is planning to harm somebody, but those who actually do utilize firearms for sport or fun in that capacity, they want people to be safe. They don't want people to be hurt. And so when we can all join hands in a moment like this and work together towards that same end to protect our children, and to have a few less unsafe, unusable, or unwanted firearms in our community be safely disposed of, it has been a true surprise and joy to see that once that clicks for everybody, we can actually bring people from across the spectrum together to do this work together. There are some people who are going to come because they, are uncomfortable with firearms. They're teachers, they're students. We have former military personnel, former police officers who are engaged with us. We do have gun lovers. We need people who understand firearms, who know how they work and operate, to help us dismantle them at these tables, who are willing to learn how to safely check and become an FSO with our organization. And so we need people from across the spectrum, political or otherwise, with many different skill sets, to join together in this work to help make our communities safer. And it has been a blessing and a joy to see that happen so far.
Well, thank you for the work you're doing. It's gunstogardensKC.org, taking things and making them into something transformational in many, many ways. So thank you so much. And thank you for joining us on KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. This KC Cares segment was brought to you by the Ewing, Mary, and Kaufman Foundation, www.org. Now, you can check out all about us on our website, kccaresonline.org. You can spread the love. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at KC Cares Radio, and Instagram, it's KC Cares Online. Don't forget, Saturday mornings, 8 a.m., you can catch us at ESPN 1510 a.m. and 94.5 FM. Thanks for joining us on KC Cares.